the Gemara said, let's say, top of the page, on 45a1. Hachinam Mestav the Rav Rabbi Yehuda Svirle. The Gemara wants to say that it's very logical that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Omar Rav said, meaning the Gemara had said that there is a dispute regarding mukseh, regarding something that is separated from you, mukseh, when Shabbat begins. That the fact that it's mukseh when the Shabbat begins, does that make it mukseh throughout the duration of the Shabbat? Right? And the Gemara says that's a argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says that something that's mukseh when Shabbat begins, not necessarily will be mukseh throughout the whole Shabbat. Yehuda says if it's mukseh when Shabbat begins, it's mukseh throughout the whole Shabbat. Meaning to say, even if the reason why it was mukseh was removed, if Shimon would say it's no longer mukseh, Rabbi Yehuda says it remains mukseh, still mukseh, and that's the halacha, it remains mukseh. And the Gemara says Rav was of that opinion that it remains mukseh. Let's say the Gemara gave the case, you had a bed. You had money on the bed when Shabbat came. And you intentionally had in mind that you wanted the money to be there on the bed. So the money was on the bed and you intentionally wanted the bed to support the money. The bed becomes a basis. It's a support for the mukseh. And it has the status of the mukseh. So even if later on, subsequently during the Shabbat, the money was left the bed. The cleaning lady took the money off the bed. She stole it. Okay? She hope she didn't steal it. She took the money was removed from the bed. One of the children took the money off the bed. Bed is still mukseh. Why? Because you intended that the money should be on the bed. If you forgot the money on the bed and somehow the money was and you knocked off in an unusual way the money, then the bed is not mukseh. It no longer has the money on it. Exactly. Very good, David. And since you had a money item, the bed support the money has the same status as the money. Or Shimon would say, no, once the money is off, the bed is no longer mukseh. That's what Shimon. Even though you place it there with the intention that it should be there. So if it's mukseh, you can't move the bed. Technically, there shouldn't be a problem of, you could sit on top of mukseh as long as you don't move the mukseh. So that would be an interesting thing. What you're asking, if a bed is mukseh because it was support for mukseh, might not be a problem as long as you don't move the bed. Meaning, let's say, for instance, a television, right? You could put something on top of when you put a television. If you have a television, it's off. Mukseh, you can't move it. But if you want to put something, you want to put a cup of water on top of the television, that's not a problem. I mean on Shabbat, you want to put the cup on top of the television on Shabbat. See, but if the television, if you have something on top of the television when Shabbat enters, then that's getting into a different question. You have to think about that. Yes, you're allowed to touch mukseh. You're not allowed to move mukseh.
You can't even move it in the shul yachid, but in the private domain.
You can't move money around in the house, even though it's a private in your house, right? No, even if you had a television and you had let's say you put your yarmulke on the television before Shabbat, so the television is supporting non-mukseh. The yarmulke is not mukseh. Technically, there's no problem if you leave something on top of the television, and by you moving it, it's not going to do anything. You're not moving the television. You're moving. You put a towel on top. You put a handkerchief on top, something on top of the television before Shabbat. You can move that item on Shabbat. You can't move the television, and you can't move the item that was supporting the television because you intended the television should be there. So let's say somehow the television was removed on Shabbat. Someone took the television off that place. But this table that was designated to use to support the television would remain mukseh, even though the mukseh was removed. Because since it was supporting mukseh, it has the status of mukseh. It was intended to be a support.
Work, move it.
Oh, so in Mukseh, because
Doing work.
because what is the item that we're referring to? The television is an item, let's say, or a computer is an item that's used generally in a prohibited fashion. I don't have use when Shabbat comes. What do I need? What do I need the television for? I can't. It's used for in a forbidden fashion. By pressing a television on Shabbat, I will be doing a sin. So therefore, it's separated from my mind, and therefore the rabbis say you shouldn't handle everything on Shabbat. Things either because they're afraid you might come press the television. Let's say a hammer. I can't move a hammer on Shabbat unless on the certain on money. Why can't I lose money on Shabbat? Because money, what use do I have for money on Shabbat? I can't buy anything. So it's separated from me. And the rabbis say items, certain things that are removed from me, we're going to go ahead and say you can't move them, can't handle them. Now, why did the rabbis say you can't handle them? The rabbis don't want you to handle everything on Shabbat. Sometimes they're afraid if you handle everything on Shabbat, you might come to carry outside in a place where there's no Eruv. That's one reason that's given. Good morning, Asaf. Another reason that's given is the rabbis are concerned. The rabbis don't want that Shabbat should be like a regular day. If you handle everything, it's like a regular day. You'll be busy the whole day moving things around. I say? What do Americans do on a Sunday in the suburbs? Barbecue. What do they do in the suburbs besides barbecue? They're in the garage. They're moving. You got it, David. They're moving things around in the garage. Am I right or wrong, David? The handyman. The whole Sunday they're rearranging every Sunday. And so what? So what's the story? So it's not if you would be able to do that on Shabbat, then your whole Shabbat will be a day in the garage instead of being a holy day. The rabbis want the day to be a holy day. So that's some of the reasons, David, to address your point of why the rabbis felt we have to impose this prohibition for your benefit to ensure that the Shabbat either is protected and not violated by carrying in a place where there's no Eruv, or that the Shabbat should be a very productive experience. That not that your Shabbat is a day in the garage, so to speak. It should be a very holy day. Is that clear? Let's continue in the Gemara. We're now on 35a, 45a1. So we said the Gemara says Hachanam Mistavra on the top of the page. The Rav Rabbi Yehuda Srile, the Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda that once it's Muksef when Shabbat comes, it's Muksef for those Shabbat. The Amar Rav, Manichin Nea Gabi Deka b'Shabbat. Rav said this is what we got into yesterday. We got into the tree. Yesterday was dedicated to the trees. It's tree day. We'll talk more about the trees. Yeah. Adam, I sent you a text message yesterday about the trees.
Oh, no, I actually didn't get that.
You didn't get it. You got it. Okay, so unless I forgot to send you the message. Well, right. We're going to. I'll repeat it again maybe later. Asaf, I want to make sure you get this. We spoke about the peg in the tree. Mark's question of could I hang my jacket on a peg?
Right.
So I want to clarify the story, make it clear. The Chafetz Chaim himself says that the language needed clarification. So I was a good company that it wasn't so clear, and he clarified it. There's something called the tree, something called the side of the tree, something called the side of the tree. Okay? So if you go ahead and you put a peg, a nail in a tree before Shabbat, that's the side of the tree. And the side of the tree, I can't use the side of the tree on Shabbat. I can't hang my jacket on that nail. Meaning the rabbis were concerned that a person shouldn't come on Shabbat, shouldn't use a tree on Shabbat in a way that you might come to cut something off the tree, a branch, a fruit. So therefore they said, don't use the tree itself. Don't sit on top of the tree. Don't climb a tree on Shabbat. And therefore don't climb the tree. And therefore, not only that, even the side of the tree, like that nail that you put into the wall, into the wall of the tree, that's the side of the tree, and you also can't use that on Shabbat. But if you attach something to the nail, if let's say, like Mark maybe gave the example, if you had your jacket on the nail before Shabbat, Now, if you want to go and put something in your jacket, you could put something in your jacket and take something out of your jacket on the Shabbat, because the jacket is the side of a side. But I can't put the jacket on the side of the tree because I'm using the side. I can't put the jacket on the nail, but I could go ahead and put something in the jacket and take something out of the jacket. Or what's the case with Shulchan Aruch? I have a ladder, small ladder, and I want to go ahead. If I can't put the ladder against the peg, against the nail on Shabbat, because then I'm using on Shabbat the side of the tree. If I put a ladder against the nail, I want to keep the ladder to hold up against the nail. That's using the side of the tree. But if I put the ladder there before Shabbat, now the ladder's status is the side of the tree. The nail is the side of the tree. The ladder is the side of the side. And I could use the side of a tree on Shabbat. Therefore, I could go up and down the ladder on Shabbat. But I had to have put the ladder before Shabbat there. Now, the hammock. We spoke about the hammock, yes. So the hammock, it's tied to a tree. Can I go ahead and use a hammock on Shabbat? So it would seem, based on what we said, if the hammock is directly tied to the tree, so the hammock should be considered the side of the tree, and I should not be able to use the hammock. But if the hammock is tied to something else, there's something that's tied to the tree, and I tie the hammock to that. Let's say there's a piece of wood that I tied to the tree, and now I attach the hammock to that piece of wood or piece of metal that I put into the hammock, into the tree, and I attach the hammock to that. So now the hammock is the side of the tree, and I should be able to use it if I did it before Shabbat. Now we did a picture. Someone did a picture. Good morning. I asked him to give me a picture of the hammock, right? So I wanted to see. So he showed me a picture online of the hammock, and the way the hammock was made, right? The hammock is thrown through, right? But the hammock with the tether to a tree. So there, his picture of the hammock was they had a tether tied to the tree, and the hammock is tied to the tether. So to me, that maybe that should be. It would seem to me. I'm not a halachic authority to give, but I'm not the big rabbi. But I would say is that the logic would be the tether is like the side of the tree, and now I attach the hammock to the tether, and now the hammock becomes the side of the tree, and I should be able to use the hammock. Now, do all hammocks have a tether that they tie the hammock to? I don't know. I'm not in the area. I'm a city boy. I'm not a country boy. David maybe knows about the country a little bit. But you hear what I'm saying, David? So if all the hammocks are tied to this tether, there's great room to say you could sit on the hammock because you're using the side of a tree. And also just for Adam's appreciation, it brought down I could touch a tree. I can't use the tree. If I want to touch the tree, the same way I could touch the television. The television is off. I want to touch the television, the wall of the television. When you touch it, it's not going to move, right? Is the television going to move when you touch the television? No. So there's no problem touching the television as long as you don't move the television. So therefore, when people there's a certain game that people play when you gotta touch the tree. Whoever touches the tree first. So the point of Ramah, the Ashkenaz Rabbi Shulchan said you're allowed to touch the tree. But if you go ahead and, as long as you don't move the tree, but to climb the tree is different than touching the tree. That's really using the tree in a more significant fashion. So you can't climb a tree even though you're not moving the tree. So that's the irony, right? You can technically climb on top of your television if you're not moving it. But you can't climb on top of a what? A tree, but you could actually touch the tree. Because I was wondering about that game that kids play. They touch the tree. Is that prohibited or not? It sounds like it's not a problem to touch the tree. They can't go up the tree. All right, that is now. All the Chafetz Chaim says you can't lean on a tree, and he says that the Gemara Chagiga says that's only if you lean with all your strength. You can't, meaning if you're gonna lean on a tree with all your strength, you're leaning, and I think it might be brought down. A guy, a guy who's look it up. If a guy is weak and he can't, and he needs to put all his strength against the tree, so he's using the tree in a very significant fashion, then that would be considered a problem of leaning against the tree. But a guy who's healthy, strong, he's not going to lean strongly against the tree. He doesn't really need it for great support, so that's not called the problem of using the tree. You can't use the tree, you can't climb the tree, but and that would be coming about leaning. So that would should be at least that's they talk about. So here's a whole discussion about this point. We have to look more into this point of leaning on a tree. As long as you're not leaning it with all your strength, you have to see more about that halacha. Because I see a long discussion in the Chafetz Chaim about that. Okay, so did that clarify a little bit about the tree? It's much clearer, but I got to get the other clarify for everybody else who was here yesterday, because it was not. Yesterday was we got into the subject. It wasn't really we didn't really have it all down packed like today. I think it's very clear. So now with that background, now the Gemara is like this. But you see, what's interesting is that our Gemara, the way we're learning our Gemara, what about taking things on and off a tree on Shabbat? So that we're saying is we're learning that's called significant. That's called use of a tree. I can't take something off a tree on Shabbat. And that's how we wanted to learn the Gemara, because the Gemara says, and by the way, I saw there that it is a matter of discussion. Is that really called use? What's that issue over there? Um, let's see if he. Maybe we'll look at the Aruch HaShulchan. Let me get out the Aruch HaShulchan for a second. Let's see what he says. Let's see. Okay, I have to find it. Okay, I have to see more about it. Okay, so we're going to go with this explanation for now, that there'll be a problem of taking something off the tree on Shabbat. Look at this Gemara over here. The Gemara says, the Amarav, Menichin ner agabideko b'Shabbat. You could leave a lamp on a tree before Shabbat, a Shabbat lamp, a Shabbat that has an oil lamp that you lit for to give light for Shabbat. You could leave it on the tree. Why? Because we're not afraid you're going to come take it off the tree. Why aren't we afraid you're going to take it off the tree? Because it's mukseh. The lamp, even when it goes out, it's mukseh. So therefore, you're not going to come take it off the tree. But you can't leave a lamp on a tree for Yom Tov. Because why? Because Yom Tov, you're allowed to move a lamp. You might come to what? Move the lamp from the tree. So if you leave the lamp on the tree, if let's say you put the lamp before Shabbat on the tree, sorry, before Yom Tov on the tree, the Shabbat oil lamp, you put it there before Yom Tov. But what are we afraid? You're afraid you might come because you could carry, and you put it there before Yom Tov. But the problem is you might come move that lamp if you're gonna leave it there. And if you move that lamp, you are using the tree. The moving of the lamp is using the tree. So therefore we say don't leave that nair, don't leave that nair on that tree before Shabbat, before Yom Tov. Strict than Yom Tov than a Shabbat, right? So Tov Kuf Yud Dalet. Morning. You got my text message last night? Yesterday about the tree. I don't know if I sent it to you. No. Okay, so if you take a look. Good morning, Boker Tov. So if you get it, and then we could talk more about it. So it says over here, like David said, we're more strict on Yom Tov than what? Than Shabbat. In this situation. And who said this statement? Rav. Eddie, we're on 45. Just in summary, we said you can't hang your jacket on a nail that's attached to a tree. But if something is attached, something else is attached to the nail that's attached to the tree, then you could use the side of a tree. You can't use the side of a tree. And a hammock, we wanted to say, if the hammock is attached directly to the tree, it should be a problem. But then that's called the side of it. The hammock is the side of a tree. But if the hammock is attached to something else that's attached to the tree, say a metal bar that you attach to the tree and you put the hammock attached to that, that should be fine. That was just our basic conclusion. So back to the Gemara. Bishlam the Rav Yehuda Sriule, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, Hainu the Shani ben Shabbat Yom Tov. But if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, you hold that there is a problem of mukseh even when the lamp goes out, when the Shabbat oil lamp went out, there's a problem of mukseh. So therefore, you make that distinction between Shabbat and Yom Tov, because we're not afraid on Shabbat you're going to come move the. We're not afraid on Shabbat you're going to come move the lamp, and therefore you could leave the lamp there from the oil lamp from before Shabbat. But Eli Amrit, if Rav holds like Rav Shimon, then once the Shabbat oil lamp goes out, Rav Shimon holds it's not mukseh. If it holds not mukseh, see that you might remove it from the tree because it's not mukseh. And if you remove from the tree, you're using the what? The tree. So therefore, you should not be able to leave that there either. Mali b'Shabbat, Mali Yom Tov. What's the difference between Shabbat and what's the difference between Yom Tov? Both should be a problem. And the fact that you make a distinction is just showing me that Rav holds, like Rabbi Yehuda, that not only if you light a menorah before Shabbat, not only you can't move the menorah when the light is on of the menorah, when the oil light is on. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Even when it goes out the fire, and you want to go ahead and move it, you can't move it because it remains mukseh. Now, the Gemara now challenges. Rav Rabbi Yehuda Svirle, you're telling me that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that he holds of that an oil lamp that was lit before Shabbat, and then the fire goes out, retains the same status of mukseh? Are you telling me that retains the same problem of mukseh? But we have a story. Rav. They asked Rav the following question: Mahu l'tetule shraga de Chanukata? Can you move the Hanukkah menorah mikame chavarei b'Shabbat? It's Friday night. You lit the menorah before Shabbat, right? Lit the menorah before Shabbat, and then the menorah goes out. Can I move that menorah? Why do I want to remove it? Because there were these people. It was the name of a nation called the Chaverim, the Chavarei, and these people, they made certain decrees against the Jewish people. They were a tough nation that ruled in Babylon together with the Persians, and they made a decree that you're not allowed to light the Hanukkah menorah. And some say that this is referring to there was their holiday, that their holiday was that all lights are in their house of worship, in the church. No light is able to be lit outside the church, so to speak. And one of their holidays came out on Hanukkah. So it seems that they weren't afraid that they're going to catch there wasn't a concern about lighting the menorah during that duration of time that the menorah will be lit. And those, how much time does it take? The light has to last a half hour till after dark. But it's a minimum amount of time that the menorah will be on. But if you have to leave the menorah there for 26 hours, 25 and a half hours, whatever it is for the whole Shabbat, so maybe they'll come in the morning and they'll see that Jews lit a menorah. Or they'll see that there was a menorah lit if the menorah is out, because they would leave the menorah near the public, right? Outside, right? They used to light the menorah outside. What's this thing doing outside? So they'll say, oh, the Jews lit the menorah. They didn't follow our edict. So now the question: after it went out, would we allow you? Would we allow you to move this menorah or not? Would we say there's a problem of mukseh? I can't move it. Now, obviously, the danger wasn't a life and death danger, because if it was a life and death danger, then you should definitely be able to move it. Or you would have a different question: what's better, to light the menorah for Hanukkah, and then violate? You have to be able to move it later on, or would we say better don't light the menorah that Friday night, so you won't come to violate the Shabbat of a mukseh? That would be a separate question. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
So here we had the question, Mark. They asked Rav, can you move a Hanukkah menorah when we are under the ruleship of the Chaborim, or the Chaverim? These were a tough nation, and they made certain decrees against us that we shouldn't have. They don't want us to have the menorah on. They don't want us to light a menorah. So now, when the menorah went out on Shabbat, are we allowed to move it or not allowed to move that menorah? That was the question. And Rav told them, Shapidami, that he says, you know what? Once the light of the menorah went out, you can move the menorah. So the Gemara wants to see. So we see that Rav holds that there's no problem of muksa when it goes out. And that seems to be in connection with Reb Shimon's opinion, which we established that Reb Shimon holds that if you light a Shabbat menorah for Shabbat candles, right? People use oil. Not everyone uses candles, right? And he says when it went out, you can. He says you can move. Rav Shimon says once it's out, you can move it. We hold you can't do that. But here it seems like Rav is agreeing with that because Rav says you could go ahead and move this menorah on Hanukkah Friday night after it goes out. He said you can move it. So the Gemara says you can't, as Mr. Haber would say, different case, could be different law, different reason. Because it's true, he allowed, maybe that case is unique. Because that case, you have a situation with this nation that made a decree against you. So there, that you shouldn't have lights on only in their house of worship, only in their church or whatever it is. So maybe in that case, Rav would say that once it went out, the rabbis would be lenient and allow you to move it. But in a general case, they would not, right, Ezra? They would not allow you to. You can't prove that Rav holds like Rav Shimon on a regular normal Shabbat. On a regular normal Shabbat, he would not allow you to move it once it went out. The only reason why, good morning, Rabbi. The only reason why he's allowing you to move it is because it's called Shat Hatchat. It's a very pressed time. It's a very challenging time. If it's a very challenging time, because of this nation that was in Babylon, that was very tough on the Jewish people regarding having lights on Hanukkah. So there, he allowed you to move it after it went out, but not in a regular, normal situation. They will not allow you to go ahead and move a Shabbat oil menorah after the lights went out.
Rav or Reb Shimon?
Say that again.
Rav or Reb Shimon?
Right. So Rav would
Because
hold like
Reb Shimon lets you move it all along.
Right. Rav Shimon would allow you to move it all along every Shabbat. Rav Shimon would say you can move the Shabbat menorah after the lights went out. And Rabbi Yehuda says you can't do that.
Right.
Since when Shabbat came, it was mukseh.
Right.
That level of mukseh, that high level of mukseh, will remain throughout the whole Shabbat.
Right.
So that's what he says.
So Rav is saying you can move it after because of danger of the situation.
Because of this type of, the commentaries point out that it was not, it wasn't a pikuach nefesh. It wasn't a life and death question of moving it, but then there wouldn't be any question. Everybody would agree. I mean, they asked Rabbi Rav, can we move this menorah, this menorah that we use for Shabbat, for Hanukkah? Can we move it because we're afraid of this nation? If it was a question of sakana nefashot, that maybe they would get life and death, of course you can move it. There's no question. So what's the question? Can we move it? So therefore, they want to explain that it means it's not a question of life and death. But it will be a very challenging. We don't know what they'll take about, maybe what they will do, but it's not a real serious life and death question. So that's how they want someone to explain. And Amalu, he told him, Kedai hu Rabbi Shimon l'smoch alav b'shat hatchak. That Rabbi Shimon, even though Rabbi Shimon is not the opinion that we're going to follow, but in general, on a regular Shabbat, we're not going to move the Shabbat oil menorah when the lights went out, but b'shat hatchak, on a pressed time, you can rely on him. And by the way, this is a very big thing in general halacha, that you could have, when you have two opinions in halacha, even if you generally hold like one opinion, it doesn't mean that the other opinion is not an opinion. You know what I mean? I'll give you Rabbi Vadi Yosef. A lot of times he writes, let's say he has a certain question, and even though the Sephardi halacha in general would be a certain way, but he would say, the Ashkenazim hayotzim biyad Rama, that they follow the Rama. Sometimes he will use that opinion of the Ashkenaz opinion to join into other reasons to allow a certain situation. Meaning, if all things would remain equal, let's say the Sephardi opinion on a certain subject would be stricter, let's say, so he would say that's a strict opinion. But now that there's other things that are weighing in, other situations, morning doctor, then morning Levi, then he will use you. Sometimes you would bring in that other opinion that you generally don't accept. That's what the Gemara is showing. Why? Because this is, so here the Gemara is applying to Shatat Chak. We're very pressed because of that nation of the Chabarim, the Chaverim. These guys are tough cookies. So therefore, forgive me if anyone's wife's name is Cookie, but therefore that is why we will use his opinion in this press situation. You have to be a big posek to know when to apply such a rule. Avad Yosef could tell you, the Gemara could tell you. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you all for joining. Yes. So we said, Mark, we got it clear yesterday. Rabbi, we got it clear. Me and the rabbi, we looked it over afterwards. That you can't put your jacket on the nail that's attached to the tree. But if you attach something to the nail, meaning, let's say a hammock. If a hammock is attached directly to the tree, you should not be able to use the hammock because you're using that's the side of a tree. But if you attach the hammock to something else, to a piece of wood that's attached to the tree, then it should be fine. That's our basic, Rabbi. That's our basic conclusion. Okay.
It has to be attached to attached. Second level.
Second level, side of a side, and then you can use
Side of
that.
Side, right.
Have a great day, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the message was that you can't, something that's stuck to a tree, that's called the side of a tree. I can't use the side of a tree. I can't hang something on it.
You messaged me that?
Yeah, I thought I meant, but something that's stuck to the side, but the side of a tree, let's say if I go ahead and I put a ladder against the peg,
Right.
so the peg is the side, the ladder is the side of the side, then I could go up the ladder. But like Mark said, yes, but you can't put the ladder there on the Shabbat. Then you put the ladder against the peg, that means you're using the sign on Shabbat. Put the ladder before Shabbat. Again, that's what the Chavetz Chaim, by the way, he says he needs to clarify the language of Mechaber wasn't so clear. And that's the Chavetz Chaim, he says that. So that's why we got a little yesterday, a little bit, yeah. Have a great day. You got a chance or not yet? Okay. What? No, yeah. Have a great day, Mark. Yeah, what? Shimon Lamevav, I'll tell you, it's towards the end of the Simon. Shin Lamevav, Yud Gimel. Have a great day, everyone. So take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Morning. You too.